Welcome to another wisdom podcast. We have Elisa Manjarrez with us. Elisa is into a lot of things. She's managing director at Stories Bureau. So we're going to have these stories for you today. She's a podcaster as well. She's an exec coach, all of these things. This podcast brought to you by podpire.com. If you want to start scale, be invited to podcast or even get sponsors, you can go to podpire.com. Podcasts are pretty fun. You can learn, you can get leads, you can build a community, and even generate clients. So podpire.com. Elisa, welcome to the pod. Can you tell us a bit more about yourself and about what you're into nowadays?
Yeah, thanks for having me. I one of the reasons why I wanted to come on this podcast because you literally sent me an email yesterday and then here we are today, and I saw you can see like all of your list of things, and you're like about so much, and I loved it.
Thank you.
Because I'm also about a lot of things, and I'm like, yes, let's do it. Let's be overwhelming to people.
Yeah, there you go.
What I'm into right now is I've always been like bivocational. So I've done something in the marketing world and something in the executive coaching world. And through that, I think the thing that has brought all of it together has been podcasting, which I never expected. It wasn't part of the plan. I was working at a tech company. I was VP of marketing, and this woman who I went to grad school with for coaching was like, Elisa, I really want to highlight multicultural women in the workplace. Like I'm at Pepsi, and there was this other woman who was Latina, and I had never seen anyone like that up where we are. And I want to find more of these people. So I was really bored at my last job at my tech company. And I was like, let's start a podcast. And I took a class at the LA library for free. And we went through all these exercises. And I was like, okay, I think I can do this. It sounds pretty cool. So we booked a studio, and me, my grad school friend, and another woman were all planning. We're planning on traveling to Chicago. This is like before the pandemic. So we were thinking in person, right? So we're booking, they're traveling all the time. And it just was so hard to get started. And I felt like I had all this new knowledge. And as we were talking about earlier, I'm an activator, right? So the Gallup strengths, Clifton strengths, I'm an activator. So I called my brother and I was like, okay, Michael, you're starting this financial services business. I'm doing executive coaching. Why don't we start a podcast? Because my ladies over here are taking forever. And he said yes immediately. We did 3 episodes over the holidays, launched it. We called our podcast Seriously, though. So we would talk about Netflix and cocktails and whatever, like brother sister stuff. And then we'd say, seriously, though. And then he would give some advice about, bear market versus bull market. And I would give something about living your best life. And it was so fun. And it just threw me into podcasting with someone I was really comfortable with. And so fast forward, I ended up doing the other podcast now called What Rules with the other woman, using a bunch of my learnings with my brother. When I left the tech company, someone said, Elisa, you should really do podcasting for a living. Like, you've got this. This is your thing. I was like, I don't know. Right. I was doing coaching full time. And he said, okay, I know you said you don't want to do this, but Mars Wrigley called and they want a podcast. I told them you were doing it. And so there you go. So from there, I started producing a podcast for Mars Wrigley called Future Imagined. And then it snowballed into all these other things. And now I'm doing more corporate podcasting. I became a partner with a guy who said, let's do podcasting. And here we are. It's like, yeah, there's a long story on who I am, what I'm into right now.
Pretty cool background. Love the easygoing style of the first pod you mentioned. I'll search a bit more for it. I think the website is not up anymore.
Seriously, though, podcast.com.
Yeah. All right. I thought the webpage was broken there. I'll check it again.
Okay. We
Then
don't do
working,
it anymore, but yeah.
yeah, okay. So I mean, I'm in Mexico. It's still loading. I don't think it works, but anyway, more on that later. The Mars Wrigley podcast, quite interesting. A part of me wants to work with these corporate giants for the cash, but another part is like, oh, that must be a lot of headaches to follow like all the brands, be involved the lawyers, involved like
Yeah.
the
Corporate
20 people.
comms. Yeah, there's a lot of red tape.
So how do you deal with that? Like I would go crazy
You get over it, you realize what your constraints are, and then you just have fun.
with the money.
Yeah, I as a freelancer, I was making a lot of money. Now that I mean, we still charge quite a bit for a chat cast because we're training the hosts, we're just doing all the behind the scenes things that a corporation doesn't have the bandwidth. Sometimes I'm training their content marketing team on how to produce a podcast. The Mars Wrigley one, that woman who started that podcast, she eventually had me train her whole team. And so they were all hosting from all around the world. And then she left the company. And now she has her own podcast and she does it without any of my help because I taught her how to do it. And so she still texts me every once in a while and is like, what camera are you using? Or, like, how do I get my lighting right? And we've just become friends from the whole experience. So it doesn't feel like corporate red tape. It's like relationships.
Right. That's a very cool story right there. Yeah, I had that happen to me too, working with other folks. It's always interesting the dynamics. And what is the podcast about? What was the concept? And were you given free reins for the creative side of it?
A lot of times when we meet with clients, we're asking, what are your goals? And sometimes they don't know. And so I'm like, so I usually ask, what are your goals? What's your marketing strategy? For her specifically, it was with the Foresight team. So I don't know if you're familiar with insights and foresights and the research consumer insights. So their team, their job is to predict what's going to happen 30 to 50 years in the future, and then they inform all the different lines of business of what are the trends, what are people liking. You have to be ahead of the game, right? So they originally came to me and said they wanted an internal podcast, proprietary information. It would just be produced bi-weekly or monthly, and it would go out to all the senior leadership. So that was the first thing. And we were talking about, oh, well, where is it going to live? Is it going to live on your internal internet? We can't put it on Spotify because anyone can access Spotify or Apple. You have to ask your staff to go listen to a podcast in a way that they don't normally listen to. Maybe we put it on a private YouTube. There's avenues. And by the time we got started, the topics were so big. They were interviewing all of these marketing experts from TikTok, Japan Airlines, other experts. It was like almost like a panel interview type style. It was so good. We were like, we need to make this public. And what we did was anything proprietary, we had like a little fireside chat for the internal team. So Mars got the fireside chat, but the world got, what's going to happen 30 to 50 years from now. So it was really fascinating. It was like way over my head at the beginning because just the concepts were not in my repertoire of knowledge. And now I feel like, oh, I know what's going to happen later. Maybe.
Very impressive. How did you unlock that? Did you have referrals? Did you knew people? I don't know how to get into big enterprise.
Well, referrals. I mean, it's all referrals. My company, Stories Bureau, we've been in business for a couple of years and we just launched a website like last week. So all of the business has come from people, one person in one large enterprise who then moves to another company, who moves to another company. We followed one person from, I forget where she started, maybe like PepsiCo, then she went to Dropbox, and that, just kind of, we just follow people. Again, it's relationships. So it's not about like sending a cold email. I know you're all about it, so maybe you have a better way, but
I don't.
so it's about like, who do you know and what's the niche that you're providing? In our case, how we got in was we really understand consumer insights and market research and how to tell a good story. So with that client, we started doing like PowerPoint presentations. And then through conversations, how do you want to disrupt your department? Podcasting came up. I came in the picture, and we started doing other projects from there. And it's really how that's been. Another big client we have is Equinix. They're a internet infrastructure company. That came from me going on a walk with someone who worked at Equinix. I had no idea she worked there. And I was complaining about Mars Wrigley. And I was saying, oh my gosh, because once we did one podcast with them, all these other departments started coming and said, we want a podcast. And nobody knew what they wanted. And so I could only get so far in the conversation. And I was like, how can people not know what they want? This is a Fortune 500. I probably shouldn't even be saying that, right? But this is a Fortune 500. How do they not know? And she said, actually, I work for a Fortune 500, and we've met with all these agencies to promote our podcast, and we don't know what we're doing. And I was like, what? You don't know either? Okay, let me help you. And then that just snowballed from there.
Wow. And yeah, I mean, these giants, they're run by humans, right? And humans will be humans, even top performing ones. A lot of people, they don't know really what they want. That's why they hire consultants like you. They expect you to do the thinking, be on trend and so forth. So not surprised that they don't know. Plus, there's these communication problems in these big enterprise. Most don't communicate well with one another. There's complexity. There's hires and acquisitions and all that mess. So a lot is going on. So I'm not surprised by that, but I'm surprised by the fact that you got like a big contract like that quick. That's really impressive to me. By the way, managing director, is that a synonym with CEO?
Yeah, there's technically a CEO of Stories Bureau, Corey. He's the one that started the company. And then he brought me in, and basically I came in and added all the infrastructure to the company, and we increased staff, we increased business lines, all of that. So we run the business together.
Cool. Did he give you shares too, or is it like pure salary?
I have a salary and we have a partnership agreement. So I have like a percentage.
How did he found you?
He was the agency I worked with when I worked at a tech company. So when I had first started, I was his client. And then we just stayed in touch after I left. He was like, you're really cool. And honestly, as a marketing person looking for agencies, just like you said, it's really human to human. I loved working with him, even though I was paying him money every month, or the company was paying him money. I loved working with him because he was so easy to talk about money with. I could say, here's my budget. He would say, here's what I can do. Here are my margins. Da, da, da. We were so transparent about money. And that is really hard to find in a corporate setting. And now, fast forward, that was probably 6 or 7 years ago. We have the same transparency as business partners, which you have to have. So what we built a long time ago in an agency client relationship, we now have as a partner relationship. And we are open all the time about what we want, what we're trying to do, how we can work together, our strengths, our weaknesses. We lay it all out there.
I think everyone should aim for transparency. Life is just better when you're transparent. Feels good from the heart level. Why do you think people are less transparent in big enterprises?
I think it's really hard to be vulnerable, especially if you're talking about your weaknesses. And for some, like money is a weakness, right? So at one point, when I was doing my coaching business, I had a client that basically paid my rent and she left me and I was stuck. And at the time, I was freelancing with Corey and doing like the podcast stuff. It wasn't enough to sustain me. And I had to tell him, like, I need money. I need money. I need clients. I don't know what to do. This client dropped off suddenly. There was nothing we could do. And it took, I really did not want to say, like, business owner to business owner, I'm struggling. Like, that was hard. It was a hard conversation for him. He was like, oh, you're struggling. Let's see how we can help. But for me, it took me a couple days to build up the courage to actually admit that, like, something in my mind, the situation was out of my control with my client, but it still felt like a failure.
Wow, yeah. That's hard when, especially in this capitalist system where, well, we start out with school, right? If you fail that test, you're a failure. Then the capitalist system after school, it's like, oh, what we're chasing now, it's not grades anymore, it's money. And if you don't have the money, then you're not an American dream. And if you're not an American dream, you're nothing. So, and it's like always the expectations. Everyone puts like a nice front, whether it's on LinkedIn or in the streets, and you always see the good face of them. So you have these false expectations on your side, plus the educational system, and most of our parents do never provide us with the financial education we need to be successful. I mean, my dad was an entrepreneur, but I still suck with money, kind of. I'm good at making it, okay at spending it, but I'm nowhere near like a capacity of at which I want to be with it, which is money on autopilot and abundant, true abundance. Although I think that's also like a false conception. I think that abundance is pretty much a concept in your mind. I'm definitely abundant on that level. What do you think about that?
I think you're absolutely right. It's a mindset thing because we have one of the people on our team, she works in the Philippines and she lives on an island. And when we all get together as a team, and I mean, she has a chicken farm, she lives in a third world country. And when she hears all of the rest of us talking about expensive rents in San Francisco, LA, New York, all of that, and we're like in our sweatshirts because like our heating broke and it's not, like things like that. She said several times, I feel so wealthy when I'm around you all. And she goes, I live in a third world country. There's like dirt floors here, but I being around you all, hearing what you're struggling with, like I'm so glad I don't have to struggle with that. And it's totally like it's something that's more within the person than on the outside, because on the outside you could see someone living in third world country and think like, oh no, let's help them. But she was like, no, I need to help you
Right.
because you all are like complaining about these things and paying crazy rents or mortgages or whatever, and it does not seem like a fun life. You can never
Right.
catch up.
Yeah, in San Francisco and New York, like super duper expensive. I believe it's in average it's like 3K a month. While here in Mexico, you can get luxury for $500 a month, which is why the digital nomad trend is picking up. But to what you were saying, I call it baseline. And in the startup world, people say the ramen days. Um, if your baseline is super low, like whatever happens to you, you'll make it true. I think we invent stuff in our minds like, oh, I shouldn't be that way, or what would my dad think of me? What would this best friends think of me in that situation? And obviously, all of these people also have their struggles, just that they never faced it. So you just feel bad about yourself, and it's probably self sabotage at its best, in my opinion.
Yeah, when the same person, now she works on a team, but she used to work for just me when I was doing my coaching. She would do all my bookkeeping. And when things were getting bad, she would say, "Are you eating? Like, can you afford food right now?" Like, because she would see all my numbers, and I was just starting out, so I wasn't making anything. And that it was about 2 years of working on my own and without a partner or infrastructure or anything, just me and my bookkeeper, Kat. And I learned during that time that I could live pretty well off of very little.
Yeah.
And I was so happy. I was so grateful to have, I mean, I'm happier now that I don't have to worry about it. But at the time, I was really happy to have a roof over my head, family to support me, all that kind of stuff. I don't know how I lived off of so little, but now that I'm more comfortable, I find myself like looking at my car, thinking, you know what, I probably should get a new car. Like the paint's kind of wearing off. And then I think, but why? Like, do I need a new car? Like where am I going? Who cares? And I kind of hate when I think like that, like, I shouldn't just get a car. Maybe I should get like a luxury vehicle. And it's crazy that now my mind goes there. And before I was just so much more grateful. And, it's now for me personally, I need to find like the happy medium because I don't want to live outside my means. I still have a certain level of lifestyle that I enjoy that I think is totally fine. But I want to have the attitude of gratefulness and gratitude no matter how much is in my bank account.
Right. Luxury vehicles. Me, it's like A/B test. I love luxury vehicles, but am I ready to lose it? Sure, 100%. How
Mm,
can you? Yeah, I call these days with like no food. I'd call them the rice and eggs days.
yeah.
Getting my protein from that part, and the worst that can happen, which is why I love fasting, is that you don't eat. Period.
You save a
Um,
lot of money fasting.
yeah, a couple of days, and it's really, really beneficial for your body. And actually, you derive energy on day two. Um, so that's how you think. And yeah, super grateful for my family as well. They're always there for me. Same for my wife's family. So yeah, but the cars and all of that, you need to be ready to lose it. Even like very rich people, sometimes they need to give up their assets. So if you're willing to lose it, then you can buy it. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean I think it's very similar to like what they say about lending money. If you're going to lend someone money, you should do it with the expectation you're not going to get it back. So are you willing to lend it? It's interesting to think about it for yourself. Like if you're willing to buy a luxury vehicle, for example, nothing wrong with it, by the way. Um, but you lose it, like how does that affect you? Do you feel like some of that is your value or your worth? Like what are you putting your worth in? Is it your job? Is it like, am I worth more as a person because I have a steady income versus a couple of years ago when I was like struggling to make rent? Like was I worth more? Absolutely not. I was like 100% worthy in both scenarios.
Right. What I don't like about luxury cars is like telling your brain that you think you're cooler while you're driving that if someone's watching. That's not nice. I mean, I do it for myself, just for me, just because that's what I picture when I was younger. But the answer to that, I mean, if I crash it, makes a good story. I mean, I judo cut pretty much everything into a positive thing. And yeah, these are pieces of art in some way. But I've been observing like the city Dubai, which is like Dubai.
Mhm.
And yeah, everyone rolls in luxury cars in there. And I think I'd be somewhat turned off by that. Again, like coming back to the front that everyone is putting. It's like, look at this car, but they don't want to tell you how they got it. They don't tell you about the struggles that they face as humans. So that's the part I like a bit less. I want to ask you though, because we got like a couple minutes left here about your podcast. How do you actually invite people? How do you filter them? And how do you make sure they have a good time and provide great information for your audience?
For my personal podcast, what rules? Because I produce a bunch of them for companies, but mine, we have a certain standard of guests. We want we want to know from multicultural women how you made it to the top, and I say that in quotes. So we are specifically looking for VPs, SVPs, and C-suite because we want to know, how did you break the rules? Because you don't really belong there. Like, the system wasn't meant for you to be there. So how did you do it? And we do that because we want our listeners to hear the journey, and we want them to hear a consistent journey. And it sounds very different for each person and the struggles and all that. But we try to make sure they're from some, Fortune 1000, Fortune 500. And we're emphasizing that journey in corporate America. So it's not for entrepreneurs. It's not really for you and me, right? It's for women who want to stay in multicultural leadership within corporate America. So how do you stay? There's so many podcasts about how do you leave. So how do you stay? Like, how do you you have to break the rules. So to make it enjoyable for our listeners, we give each woman that we interview, we say, here's 5 themes that we've heard. I'm nowhere near you on episodes. I think we're at like 77 maybe. But through those episodes, we have a couple different themes. And so when we're doing a pre-interview, we say, here are the themes that we've seen that are really prevalent on how women are breaking the rules, which apply to you. And then usually the woman goes, oh yeah, this one, change course without hesitation, or own your power, or whatever the theme is. They are like, that is so me. Let me tell you how. And then we just get into it from there.
What are your best stories or recurring themes that you've seen?
Probably my favorite is create what you want to see. So before we started really focusing in on corporate America, we interviewed this woman, Gabi Natale, and she's from South America, had her master's in journalism. She came to America, had no idea the term Latina. And then she had no idea that if you're a Latina and you want to be in news, you have to be basically like a sex symbol. And she was like, that's not what we have in my country. I mean, yeah, they're there, but that's not everyone. And she couldn't find a place for herself. So she created her own television studio. And she won 3 Emmys, and now she's a best-selling author. And she really created exactly what she wanted to see, and she did it her own way. And so that's really been that's a real early episode, but that was one of the early episodes that like got me inspired to see how other people are creating what they want to see.
Very inspiring. It's hard for me to imagine, right? Because I wasn't born in South America. I'm currently living in Mexico. Plus, I'm not a woman, but I just feel incredibly intimidating to come in that world, and it's been like, oh, this is how you do it, right? Well, I can imagine also somewhat similar to the Oprah story, sort of. That one was a pretty fabulous one. Do you ever imagine yourself in that seat yourself? Like, what are your ambitions for this year and the next 10?
I have always had a passion for leadership. Both of my parents, in their own regards, have been leaders, pioneers, and like small in their own communities, really not like anything, newsworthy. But I've watched the leadership journey, and I've seen how lonely it can get once you're there. For anyone who's pioneered something, anyone who's leading, whether you're in a huge corporation or an entrepreneur, I really have a passion to walk alongside them, however that looks. So whether it's at Stories Bureau, I'm helping them find their voice for a podcast. Like I'm that person for them. I love doing that. In our podcast, What Rules, if I'm walking alongside them, listening to their journey, helping them advance in their career, I love that. And I think as long as I keep working with these leaders, high achievers, the same type of people that you're interviewing on your podcast, like I really have a passion for those people because I think that there's a lot of expectations on them. And there are a lot of people who maybe are intimidated or who don't know how to just relate to them. And I think that I need them just as much as they need me, just to know I'm not alone in my journey.
How can we improve the corporate world? What is not working up there? What would be your potential solutions?
There's a phenomenon in corporate America called the broken rung. And McKinsey has been doing research for 8 years. I would suspect it's been going on a lot longer than 8 years. But when you think about all the rungs of a ladder and you see all these people, you see white men, multicultural women, you see everyone coming into the workforce equally. And then somehow you get down the way and it changes, right? And now here at the beginning of the funnel, here's everyone. And then something happens in the ladder. And the broken rung is that place, is that breaking point where for some reason, and I'll tell you the reason, but for some reason, multicultural women in general aren't getting through. And then women of color have it way worse. And what all the research says is that the place where you can really make a difference is right at the beginning of that funnel, right when everyone is entering the workforce. If you can identify women of color, women of color, really, I mean, they're the most marginalized. If you can get them opportunities and by sponsoring them, mentoring them, if you find them right out of college, put them where they need to be, you're going to set them on a path for success. And right now they're getting looked over. And so my plea to organizations is to find those people who are early in their career and give them a shot.
Yeah, I tend to think of old school type of men at the top, just, being old school, not really wanting to change and having some kind of moat and be like, yeah, we don't need to change that and we're fine just the way it is. And they don't invite folks that are not similar to them at this top and in this elitist community up there. So yeah, I
And
think
they're not bad guys. Like it's not
yeah.
like they're doing it on purpose. We've found so many of the women that have gotten ahead were sponsored by a white man, someone who did see the potential in them. So those women that broke the rules, a lot of them broke the rules by allowing a white man to help them and pluck them out of one position and put them in another. And so I feel like we give those men, yeah, who's around you? Well, if they all look like you, there's a problem. Go find someone who doesn't look like you, right? But at the same time, like there are people who want to make a difference. Part of my job is help them learn how to actually do it, right? And just to make them aware of the situation, because it's not, sure, there's racism, right? All of that. But you could blame a lot of things, but I think it's important to acknowledge the people that want to make a change.
I think women should start more startups. I believe it was Y Combinator. I was checking the other day, and back in the days, I think it was 4% women founders. Y Combinator being the best startup school in the world / incubator, and I think nowadays it's like 14 or 20. So that's a cause I'll certainly be supporting. Me, anyone that is different gets my votes, because in the business world, being different being contrarian, being odds pays off generally. So that is if you don't have blockers, right? You don't have a bunch of bros blocking you up there. It's been nice talking. I've enjoyed this convo. Where can people find out more about you, Elisa?
You can find me at storiesbureau.com. My LinkedIn is there, my podcast, all the things. You start at Stories Bureau, and then you can follow the path, stalk me however you want. And also I'm on Instagram. I'm pretty active there, alisa.coach.